Hey, what's going on, everybody? So I've been doing tropical fruit tree videos and fruit tree videos for a while now, and I've done several videos that have something to do with mangoes, but I realized I've never done a standalone mango video on tips to care for them and plant them and grow them to the point where you get some awesome fruit. My wife just did a video on tasting these lemon meringue mangoes, and as you can see, we got a couple more coming that'll be here shortly, but I haven't really given any tips on how to grow them. So mangoes are kind of one of those trees that you tell people you grow them and they kind of get blown away, like it's a very surprising tree for people. Usually I get shocks with bananas and mangoes and papayas. Bananas and papayas to me are pretty easy and don't require a ton of extra work, but mangoes do take a little extra work. They're not as hard as like an avocado or some of the more sun sensitive trees, but they do require a little extra care. So this video, I'm going to be talking about it. So some of the tips that we're going to cover planting. So I've got some really old videos of me planting these mango trees that are behind me. My boys are doing most of the work. You can tell that they're very young in these videos. They're about, I don't know, 8-9 years old, and they're 13 and 14 now. So these trees have had quite a bit of growth in that short period of time. But there's a lot of things we learned from those videos when we're watching them. So we lost most of the mangoes that you see us planting in those videos. So I want to start out by saying why. So the first reason, and I think it was the ultimate reason that I lost them, was the watering schedule that we had them on. So I had the water coming on. I figured it's a tropical tree, so I had the water coming on for 30 minutes every day, and it was like almost a hose, so not a light trickle. It was just full on water for 30 minutes every day. When I started noticing that the mango trees were dying, it was because of root rot. I had over-watered those trees. So the root rot is a huge problem if you're new and you're in Arizona and you think, oh, I'm gonna give them plenty of water. They can't give them too much water. I've seen videos from other YouTubers in Arizona that basically say you can't overwater in the desert, and just want to let you know that if your soil holds water, you can easily overwater in the desert. So that's just a word of caution. So also when planting, it's really important that you don't just trust what you're putting into your soil. So I think I had 3 trees that we planted with a mix from someone in the valley. I'm not going to get all controversial and list names, but that soil on those 3 mangoes that I planted, all 3 of them died. Did some soil tests on them, and they had some pretty high level material in them that I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it wasn't good for mango trees. I think the pH on it was like 9.5. It was very alkaline. It had just a large mix. Nitrogen was like way too high. So be very, very, very careful on what you're putting on your trees, because ultimately that's what you're going to be putting into your body when you eat the fruit. So be very careful with that. So that's a huge step. So I think what most people do when they plant a mango tree is they do a 50-50 blend of the native soil and some kind of composted soil that is broken down really good, and they mix it together. They put it in. They add the mycorrhiza and the azomite and all those things. And all those things are great. I think the biggest thing, if you want to plant a tree, just do that at least 50% native soil, if not more, because you do want them to somewhat get acclimated to the native soil. If they don't get acclimated to the native soil, then as their roots grow out, they're just going to find the other native soil, and it's going to kind of get them stuck. So I've covered water and I've covered soil. Now I want to cover another part of water, underwatering them. So mango trees they're a tropical tree. In their tropical area, they're getting a lot more rainfall than we get in Arizona. This has been an awesome monsoon season for us. Last 2 years have been very dry, so you've got to monitor your trees and don't let the water dry out. The bigger the tree in all cases, the more time you're going to have between waterings. But I would base all of your waterings off of your newest trees. So if you have a system set up, set that system up so that you're taking care of the smaller trees first. The larger trees will acclimate as long as you're not giving them 30 minutes a day deep watering. You're going to be okay. The next thing is location. So where I have found the most success growing mangoes is on an area that doesn't get full sun all day long. So my most vigorous growing mangoes, and I think I have about 13 of them, grow absolutely like animals here on the side yard of my house where you see behind me. So I've got a wall to the back of me. On the other side is my neighbor's 2-story house, and then on the other side I have my 2-story house. So as the sun's coming over, you know, they're getting sun for like 10 to noon every day. It's a lot of sun. It's direct sun. I'm no longer using shade cloths. I don't know if they're 100% necessary, to be honest, with new mangoes if you have a setup like this, because they are just getting that full sun for a short period of time. If you are going to place them in your yard and you're going to put them in an area that's going to get a lot more sun, then shade cloths would be very helpful until those mangoes get established. So as you've heard in many of the videos that I've made, morning sun, afternoon shade. So morning sun is from about 5 a.m. when the sun's coming out in the summer until about 10 a.m. So really they're only getting about 5 hours of sunlight in that morning period. And that's really important because then in the heat of the day, they're not going to lose their moisture through their leaves. They're not going to get just fried by the sun. So it's very important that you give them that break. And they will thrive. Eventually they might grow out of it to the point where they're getting more sun. And if they reach that point, then you win. Good job. That's kind of the goal. So I want to also talk to you about types of mangoes to plant. So there's thousands of mangoes. I don't want to say there's only a few types, but you could either get a grafted variety, which is what most of the cool Zill varieties are from Florida. Those are not going to get huge here in Arizona. They're going to say semi-dwarf. They're not going to get very big. If you want a bigger tree, the best option for you is to either buy it bigger or play the long game and plant a seedling. So I'll show a clip of the seedling in my front yard. It's one of those kids specials. I have no idea what it is. Kid just put a seed in the ground and it started to grow, which is really cool. It's in a spot where I don't water, which is incredible. So these little seedlings are resilient. They're going to strive really hard to live here. Because it's the next generation, the parent plant has already been here, the seed ripened in the summer. That's how they adapt. I mean, usually it's not one generation, but that's how they adapt to new climates. So this particular mango, I've not had water on it. The only water it's really been getting is rainwater. Occasionally there'll be like some runoff from a sprinkler that might make it back there, but it's not very common. So if you want a bigger tree, play the long game or buy one. So seedling or buy one. Otherwise they're going to stay relatively small. They can still get, like 15 feet tall if you don't prune them back, but they might topple over. I wouldn't do that. So the next part I want to talk about is what to feed your trees. So I used to do a lot of chemical fertilizers because they were cheap and easy. And I'm not 100% opposed to using some. I will say though, I've noticed a big difference when I've gone away from the chemical fertilizers and went to the organic, natural options. So the last thing you want to do is you don't want to hurt your soil. So your soil is an organism, your soil is alive, and if your soil is alive, the organisms that are in there are breeding, pooping, having babies. I know it sounds gross, but they're creating additional life, and they're creating nutrients that you wouldn't probably get from somewhere else. So I like to continue to feed my trees with lawn clippings, wood chips that I get from Chip Drop, basically anything that I can shred and tear down myself. If a banana tree falls over, heck, that's going to decompose and feed my trees. The next thing I do is I add to the watering system quite a bit of fish emulsion and seaweed kelp. I put them in a system, sprinklers pop up, they nuke kind of the leaves, so it's like a foliar feed, and it feeds the tree itself. Now be careful with that, because fish emulsion is very acidic, and if you have too high of a concentrate, you might risk some leaf burn. But as you can see, these leaves are very healthy. You don't see any burn. The only thing you might see is a little bit of wrinkling, which I don't know if that means anything good or bad, but very healthy leaves on all my mangoes, which I'm very happy about. Now you can go away. So I feed them fish emulsion, worm castings. I have a ton of worms, so the worms are also just producing their own castings. I do millipede castings. I do the biggest thing though, and the number one thing, and I will give credit where credit is due, I learned this from Green Life, is soil sulfur. So the soil sulfur helps you get the pH to where you need it to be in order to make your mangoes capable of absorbing any of the nutrients you put in. So if you don't check, if you're not going to check your pH, because I did a video on testing your soil to see what your pH was, and my pH was 7. So mangoes like it between 5.5 and 6.5, maybe even lower. So if you're not going to test your soil and you're here in Arizona, there's a good chance you have 7+ soil, because I've added a ton of organic material to my soil and it was still 7. I thought for sure my soil is going to be great, but because it was very low, are very high on the pH side, I was just shocked. So I'm continuing to use soil applications, and how I'm doing is I'm just getting a bag of soil, sprinkling it around the base of the trees every couple months, just so that I can have that continual amount of soil sulfur that's breaking down the pH. So the negative for me was I thought doing an application every 6 months was good enough, and my soil was still at 7. But what I've come to learn is when we're taking water, and during the summertime we're taking a lot of our water from the Salt River and the aquifers. Those aquifers come from the ground, from deep underneath the ground in the soil, and that's where there's a lot of minerals, and the pH that comes from the water that we get from our tap system is very high. It's like 7.5 to 8. So as we put sulfur down, it's going to be combating just the water that we're naturally putting in. So I do now mix, if I have a new mango to plant, I do mix a little bit of sulfur in with my mix, just to help get the pH lower with that acid. So soil is definitely probably one of the key factors there, is keeping that pH low so your trees can eat. Because if it's even off by 1 point, your mango trees may not be able to absorb the nutrients that you're giving it, and you're just wasting your money with everything else. Once I did that, that's when I noticed the growth. The growth was incredible after I started adjusting the soil. So that's the biggest tip I take away from planting mangoes. The next thing, aside from location and feeding your trees, is being careful when you feed your trees, because I've noticed the bark of mango trees, it actually starts out really green, and then it, like an avocado and others, it will harden off and you'll actually start to see the bark. But that bark is also kind of soft. So what I made the mistake with one of my first mangoes, my Namdok My mango, is I piled wood chips around it, and I wasn't thinking about the wood chips resting on the side of the mango tree. And as the wood chips decompose, they actually generate heat, and they were eating away at the bark of the mango tree. I was able to put it back, put some wound sealer on. I think it's going to live, but you know, we'll see. So don't just put things on your bark. Create a mulching around your tree for it to feed. And this is the tip that I think a lot of us, including myself, struggle with. So you get a 3-gallon mango tree. You've never tried some of these wild flavors that you're hearing about: fruit punch, sweet tart, coconut cream. You know, you see all these orange sherbet, all these cool varieties of mangoes, and you just want to try them. and you get this little mango tree, and it flowers for the first time. You're excited because you're seeing all these little mangoes everywhere, and then all of a sudden on that little mango tree you just see the fruit popping up like this, and you want to let it develop so that you can try that unique mango. Like, that's all you want to do, is you want to try it. So I did that with my first Nam Doc Mai mango, the same one that I made a lot of mistakes with. And I'm going to tell you, that was the best mango I've ever had. It was delicious. It was insanely good. Unfortunately, that's the last mango I ever got off that tree. It is true that if you let a new mango like that go to fruit, that it is taking away some of the first year's best opportunities to grow its root system, to get more foliage so that it can practice photosynthesis and just expand. So if you kind of get in that selfish phase, which that's what I'm going to call it because that's what it is, and you decide to eat a mango off of a first year, second year tree, then you're going to be in trouble. So kind of my rule of thumb is with the mango tree is at the base of the mango tree, if you can't wrap your finger and thumb around it when you're trying to grab it, if that's when it's big enough for you to let it go to fruit. I don't want to say, oh, after 5 years, because if it doesn't grow very well, you still don't want to stunt its growth anymore. So let the trunk get a little bit bigger, and then you can make that decision on whether or not it's time to eat your first mango. So I've done that with my lemon meringue, not by choice. It just didn't fruit for the first 3 years, and now the trunk's probably this big. I love it. I did it with my Kathy mango. That one was by choice, so I plucked all the fruit off. I've done it with my Phoenix mango, and it's doing a lot better. I have a Valencia Pride mango that I really wanted to try, and so I picked it on my first year, and now that one's growth seems pretty sluggish as well. So I'm telling you this from experience. Don't try to eat your mangoes on the first year, okay? It won't go well for you. I think mangoes are one of the coolest plants that we can grow here, and I think universally speaking, it's a language that people in the tropics know, people outside the tropics know, because mangoes are becoming a very popular fruit. You might ask yourself, well, they are becoming so popular, why in the world would I want to waste my time growing it when it's one of those things I can just go to the grocery store and get? I'll tell you why. Because the stuff you get in the grocery store is garbage. It's horrible. Stuff you get in the grocery store ships easily, and that is its #1 defining quality. You eat it and you can feel the fiber when you're eating it. It is not good. When you're eating one of these mangoes, homegrown in Arizona, there's nothing like it. And I've been to Hawaii, I've had their mangoes, they're delicious. I've been to Florida, had their mangoes, they're delicious. But there's something about our superheated desert maturing these fruits that just make them very good. Similar to like what we get with our Arizona sweet mangoes. We have a higher sugar content based off of the amount of heat that we get. So just keep that in mind. It's a good reason to grow a mango, and if you like growing things, it's fun. It's a lot funner than an orange tree or something that's super common. You can tell friends about it. So then here comes the how to keep the dang things alive. So the summertime, I don't do a lot of extra protection. I've already talked about shading them in the summertime. I haven't really had a big issue with summer being a problem for my mango trees, unless I missed a watering cycle here and there. But the #1 thing that you got to worry about with mango trees is the wintertime. So because of my location on the side of my house, it gets the radiated heat from the house and from the wall. It gets the cold windbreak for the wind chill factor from the houses blocking the wind and walls on all sides. So that's a huge advantage in the wintertime. Also, it's because of its location to the house, it's easy to do supplemental heat with like heat lamps or lighting if you think that the temperature is going to go below freezing for a period of time. Now, not all mangoes are created equal. Some mangoes, if it gets down in the 40 degrees, it will not like it, and it will not live. This lemon meringue mango I actually got from Queen Creek Tropicals. It was one of their bargain mangoes. It had no life on it whatsoever, just little tiny green buds coming out of the trunk because they hacked it back. It had died from winter exposure over there, and that's why they were giving it selling it as a discount. Just because you see a discount plant doesn't mean it's not going to come back. But you also need to learn from that lesson. You need to learn, hey, you know what? That tree suffered when it got down to, 28 degrees over here in Queen Creek. So because of that, now whenever the temperatures are going below 32 degrees, I'm extra cautious. I'll come out with heat lamps. I'll do whatever I need to do to keep these things alive. Last year I built a winter structure, and it was almost like a greenhouse, and it was able to keep them extra warm. But the 2 years prior to that, I did almost nothing because we didn't have any temperatures dropping below the 30 degrees. So I recommend you just keep an eye on your forecast during the winter time. Make sure that you're watching out for those really, really cold days. Okay. I think those are the majority of the tips that I'm gonna share with you. So hopefully you guys really enjoyed this. There's a lot of knowledge in the valley about growing mango trees. I am definitely not the pro or the expert, but I have probably killed a dozen, and I've got a dozen doing well. So I've learned some lessons, and hopefully you guys can be more successful than me and learn from some of the mistakes that I made, and just keep on growing. All right, thanks everybody. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll catch you next time.